Hello and welcome to Careers Unlocked, a podcast brought to you by the EY Foundation. The EY Foundation supports young people in free school meals to access paid work experience, employability skills and mentoring, and ultimately to further their opportunities in the world of work. We do this through a variety of programmes and partnerships that meaningfully join up both sides of the labour market. I'm Kathryn Eastwood, Director of Income and Employer Partnerships at the EY Foundation, and it's great to have you with us in Series 3 of the podcast. If you're just joining us, please go back and listen, as you've got 7 fantastic episodes to catch up on before this one, as well as our mini-sodes with bite-sized segments of information from the podcasts. Okay, so turning to today's podcast, we're going to be looking at the Metaverse and specifically the intersection between social mobility and emerging technology. The Metaverse is a technology so emergent it still doesn't have a commonly agreed definition. Yet in 2022, it received more than $120 billion of investment. Whether we agree on exactly what it is or not, one thing that is certain is that this development is too big to ignore. Since the topic may feel new for many of us, we've decided to switch up the format for today's episode and use it as an opportunity to dive deep into one topic. We'll be looking at what the metaverse is, what it could be, and what this might mean for the future of work, guided by our expert, Mira Pijselman. Mira is a digital ethics lead for EY UK&I, where she focuses on the responsible governance of emerging technologies, including AI, quantum technologies, and the metaverse. She is a lead author on EY's Quantum Intersection series, for which she has been named a 2023 finalist for Thought Leader Consultant of the Year. Prior to joining EY, Mira worked in Toronto for the Royal Bank of Canada in technology governance and subsequently obtained her MSc in the social science of the internet from the University of Oxford. Her passion is to position digital ethics as a key enabler for successful innovation at scale. And after that introduction, Mira, it feels like you're the perfect guest for this discussion. So thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast. Firstly, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Looking forward to today's conversation. Thank you very much for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I think, as you know, and many of our listeners might know as well, at the EY Foundation, we've done lots of thinking about the metaverse and specifically what it might mean for the young people that we work with. But having said that, there is still so much that I have no idea about, and I have so many questions, and I think plenty of those you'll be able to help us with today. So, Mira, I mentioned in the intro that there's still various definitions of the metaverse. Can you tell our listeners what it is?
Absolutely, I am happy to do that. I don't tend to consider the metaverse as a technology, but rather an idea. I think that's the most helpful way to position it. In my mind, the metaverse really describes a shared virtual space where people can interact, learn, work, and play in immersive and hyper realistic ways. What it is often underpinned by, from the more technical perspective, is a variety of enabling technologies. So when you hear the term metaverse, it's often in partnership with things like virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and even sometimes blockchain.
Okay, thank you for that. So, in the middle of your definition, you spoke about work. How do you see the metaverse changing the way in which we work?
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic question. And I think, particularly with Metaverse, like other innovations before it, there has been a lot of hype in the market and in the media about the potential impact that it's going to have on our world more broadly, but also in particular, as you're referencing, on the world of work. I do think in the short term that the changes practically, particularly for young people, will be relatively limited. To put this into context, I'll point to the results of our EY Trusted Metaverse Survey of 2023, which found that there are certainly some early movers in this space, but most organizations are still in an exploratory phase. They're mapping out the ways that the metaverse as a concept and those underlying enabling technologies can be best used in service of their business models. And we also know that only certain types of work are going to be well suited to the metaverse as a medium. And what I mean by that is when you think about some of that deep individual focused work, things like maybe proposal writing, maybe you're writing a report, doing research, those types of tasks are unlikely to translate well to the metaverse in comparison to some of those more collaborative initiatives, which may be more suitable for that type of an environment. With that being said, where I do see a lot of potential for change is in the types of jobs that exist that young people should be aware of. There may be opportunities for some new jobs and skills relevant to the metaverse across sectors such as creating, maintaining, designing, and monitoring virtual environments that power things like new learning platforms, customer experiences, and collaboration forums. And what I would really highlight for those starting to enter the workforce that might be concerned about the implications of the metaverse on the future of employment and the way that we do our jobs is that it's really important to both develop traditional skills like communication and critical thinking, as well as some of those new digital skills to be really well rounded and prepared for both virtual and face to face work scenarios.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, you've given us so much to think about there, and it sounds like, on the one hand, so much of it is still in that emergent stage, and there's so many variables that we don't quite know how it's going to play out. And you touched upon at the end how young people might start to think about becoming more well-rounded in terms of the different skills that they're developing and acquiring. Are there any other ways that young people should be preparing themselves for these potential changes, either through that deeper skills development, or should they be reading more about the opportunities that the metaverse may be opening up? What else can our listeners do to really immerse themselves more in the opportunities that it may present?
I would say for those that may want to kind of ride this wave and potentially be a part of building the future of the metaverse, being an engaged digital citizen is really, really key. Because when you do hear these terms like metaverse, virtual reality, AI, sometimes it can be a little bit confusing because we don't always have consistently used definitions across the sector. And so the best thing that you can do if you're starting to explore some of these spaces is access a search engine, go to something like YouTube, do a little bit of reading at the library. I'm really a believer that youth voices are so incredibly important and essential to evolving the technology ecosystem in a way that aligns with the values and the needs of future generations. And the first step in expressing your voice and really being able to take part in potentially building the future of the metaverse is learning as much as you can to build up your knowledge base and your authority. So I would definitely suggest seeking out learning opportunities, such as some of the programs that the foundation I know provides for the community. Have as many conversations with different types of people as possible. And start to build your skill set. And something that I wish that I knew when I was starting my own career is that 90% of people are willing to help if you ask. So if you do have something like LinkedIn, reach out to people like myself and just ask for help if that's something that you're interested in getting involved with. I know that from my own perspective, if you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to have a conversation.
I absolutely love that statistic, and I think it's something that we can apply across the board, and all of our listeners, no matter what stage they are in their careers, can really take that advice in terms of people being so willing to help. And I think this is one where we're all in the same boat to an extent, in that we're quite vulnerable because it is such a new technology. And I think with any new technology, and particularly one like this that has such potential to have a huge impact on our social and working lives, there is a mixed reaction, mixed response, and lots of questions coming up. What would you consider the main advantage and the main challenge presented by the metaverse for young people?
As a digital ethicist, something for me that's really important is responsible science communication. So when it comes to the metaverse, it's important to remember that because it's still incredibly nascent, so early on in its maturation curve, it's so important that when we do talk about it, we exercise that caution that you're kind of alluding to when we talk about potential benefits so that we don't misrepresent where we're at with the technology itself. So what I would say the main advantage that we can foresee right now, particularly for young people, is really the potential for enhanced collaboration, learning, and communication with user interfaces that are really reminiscent of a lot of the games and tools that Gen Z have grown up with and have a natural affinity for. You know, the metaverse could provide a platform for individuals to connect and work in various industries and fields, regardless of their location geographically, in ways that are much more immersive and dynamic than traditional collaboration software that we might be using today, particularly as fully remote and hybrid working have become more commonplace after the pandemic. More immersive collaboration platforms will be really valuable for doing certain types of work moving forward. But to provide that balanced perspective, there's also definitely some challenges that need to be carefully understood. And in our work at EY on the metaverse to date, we've really had a tremendous focus on how to enable trusted metaverse experiences moving forward. But at the same time, in that same EY Trusted Metaverse survey that we talked about earlier, we found that 39% of respondents say that there is a risk that business interests will trump user rights such as accessibility, diversity, and inclusion. And 37% of respondents say that ethical considerations could be overlooked as companies compete to build dominant positions. And so, to give an example of some of these concerns, particularly within a work setting, the metaverse could form the basis for sensitive data collection, such as biometric data, maybe personal information about employees. And given this fact, as a user, I would be questioning the extent to which I could trust that this data was secured, for what purposes it was going to be used, and particularly thinking about whether it might be leveraged in combination with advanced analytic tools powered by things like artificial intelligence to track, monetize, and alter human behavior. And these types of things are really important to think about, given the focus on algorithmic manipulation and nudging that are really prime concerns within some impending AI regulations, such as the EU AI Act. So while there are advantages, there are definitely also challenges that society needs to consider, as well as businesses that are looking to deploy metaverse experiences, whether that be for customers or for their employees.
Okay, brilliant. And again, so much good advice in there, Mira. And I think a lot of what I'm hearing is with the newness of what may be presented and what may be offered to young people, is to continue to have that real heightened awareness in terms of what they're sharing, how they're interacting, where their data might be going, and what exactly they're opting into as part of their interactions within the metaverse. And hopefully that's something, back to one of the previous points you said before, we can upskill ourselves now by going onto YouTube and watching videos and trying to understand more about how our interactions in the metaverse might look. So yeah, really, really useful advice there too. In terms of considerations of the design and the operability of the metaverse as they're playing out now, what things do you think need to be considered for the metaverse to be a truly accessible and inclusive environment for everybody, but specifically for the young people that we support at the EY Foundation?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I definitely think there's a few considerations at play when it comes to making the metaverse an accessible and inclusive environment. So the first obvious one is if we focus on the accessibility angle, the metaverse needs to be designed in a way that is accessible to individuals that might have certain disabilities. So this includes designing for vision and hearing impairments, as well as making sure that virtual environments are navigable by those that might use assistive technologies. The metaverse may also present new challenges for individuals that either lack experience with digital technologies or may face financial barriers in accessing the technology itself. We've seen that the hardware associated with the metaverse, so things like virtual reality goggles, which tend to be used to engage in metaverse spaces, they're really expensive. And so ensuring that individuals have both the skills but also the infrastructure needed to navigate these environments safely and effectively, including having access to reliable information about digital literacy and online safety, these are all going to be really critical to shrinking those digital divides. Because what I don't want to see is that only certain individuals are able to make use of some of the benefits of the metaverse in the long term. There needs to be more efforts made to ensuring that metaverse experiences are accessible, both physically speaking as well as financially. Second, I would say that there's this angle around fairness. And just as data often reflects our societal biases and human faults, metaverse communities can perpetuate harmful stereotypes or reinforce existing inequalities depending on how they are created. And to point to an example here, historically in video games, and I am a big gamer myself, video games are really key predecessors, participants, and influencers of the metaverse. But in a lot of video games historically, we've seen women or female identifying avatars depicted according to the male gaze, this can contribute to some unrealistic body expectations and can have a really degrading effect on mental well-being for women and gender diverse individuals. So, if metaverse communities are not designed in an inclusive way from that perspective, amongst others, we could open the door for new modes of online harms that will disproportionately impact groups that are already marginalized online.
I guess the hope is that young people who are accessing the metaverse and those listening today can have a say in that and have an input into how equitable the metaverse can be, and that they can reflect some of the fantastic progress that's being made in the outside world, if that's what we call it, in the normal world, the rest of the world, and ensure that those same measures of progress are being made in the metaverse space too. So that was, I mean, such an interesting conversation. And as I said before, Mira, you've given us so much food for thought and some of those excitements and opportunities and concerns too. But I think that brings us to a natural close for this episode. So thank you for such an incredible discussion. As I said, you've given us plenty to think about, but you've made what can feel like quite a daunting conversation and set of ideas feel so much more accessible. So thank you for that. And thank you all for listening. If you like today's episode, please click to follow us and leave a review, as it'll help more people find the podcast. I also want to mention that the EY Foundation has been doing lots of our own thinking and convening of thought leaders and young people and experts on the key themes of the metaverse. And we're going to be publishing our very own social mobility in the metaverse report, and that's going to be coming out in October. So do keep an eye out for that. A key insight identified in the report is the need to build intrinsic motivation amongst young people with regards to the metaverse, and this is one of the actions that we will be taking forward ourselves. But we're going to be back soon with more episodes, so please keep an eye out for those coming. And in the meantime, thank you again for listening, and see you soon.